I used to think laughter was simple, loud, careless, something that faded as quickly as it came. But that afternoon in the shop, bent over a stubborn car hood with grease on my palms, I laughed with her. And it stuck to me in a way I still can't shake. The repair shop isn't much, just a corrugated tin roof rattling every time a truck goes by, and the faint hum of an old radio that plays the same 5 songs on repeat. I'd been helping my stepbrother run the place since I was 20, learning the rhythm of engines, the patience of rusted bolts. It was nothing glamorous, just work, just noise, until she started showing up. Her name was Lena, my stepbrother's stepsister from his dad's side. Older, mid-40s maybe, though she carried herself like time bent around her, not the other way. The kind of woman who knew where every tool belonged even if she'd never set foot in the shop before. When she walked in, even the clatter of wrenches seemed to quiet down. That day, she leaned against the doorway, watching us argue about a busted carburetor. My brother was explaining, in his usual long-winded way, why my fix wouldn't hold. I rolled my eyes, exaggerated enough for her to catch it. She smirked, just a small tug at her mouth, but it pulled something tight in my chest. "Careful," she said, her voice steady, a little amused. "You'll strain something with all that eye rolling." I laughed, not the forced kind you throw out to be polite. It was real, short, maybe too loud for the moment. My brother shook his head, muttering something about kids these days, but she kept her gaze on me a beat too long, like she was measuring something she wouldn't say out loud. The thing about Lena was, she filled silence without trying. She didn't rush to speak, didn't need to. Just the way she crossed her arms, fingers tapping lightly against her sleeve, was enough to make you notice her. Confident, but not in a showy way. Like someone who knew how to carry weight without ever looking burdened. Later, when my brother went to take a call, it was just the two of us by the workbench. I wiped my hands on a rag, trying not to notice how close she stood. She glanced at the scattered bolts, the grease stains on my shirt, then at me. And for a moment, too long, maybe, we just stood there. "You've got something," she said, reaching toward my face. My first instinct was to step back, but I froze instead. Her thumb brushed just under my cheekbone, slow, deliberate, lifting away a black smudge of grease I hadn't noticed. Her hand lingered a fraction too long before she pulled it back. "Better," she murmured, as if it were nothing. I couldn't think of a reply. My throat tightened. I wanted to say something easy, a joke, anything, but the word stuck. Instead, I just nodded, staring at the floor, my pulse drumming harder than it should for something so small. She didn't press, just turned slightly, her eyes flicking to the open doorway where my brother's voice carried back in. She stood straighter, like nothing had happened at all. But it had, at least to me. When she finally left, the sound of her heels faded against the concrete until the shop felt louder without her in it. My brother kept talking, oblivious, and I tried to focus on the carburetor again. But my cheek still burned where her thumb had been. It was nothing, just grease, just laughter, just a glance. And yet, I knew I'd be thinking about that moment long after the radio went quiet. It was a week before I saw her again. I told myself I wasn't waiting, but the way I kept glancing at the doorway whenever the bell above the shop rang gave me away. She came in carrying a box, small, taped up at the corners like she'd struggled with it. My brother wasn't around, so it was just me. She hesitated in the doorway, scanning the place like she wasn't sure if she should leave it. "You can set it down here," I said, patting the workbench. She looked at me, then at the bench, then finally stepped in. I noticed her hands first, slender, rings she probably forgot to take off, faint traces of red along the cuticles like she'd bitten them earlier. She set the box down carefully, exhaling like it had been heavier than she wanted to admit. "Thanks," she said. Her voice was thinner than last time, tired at the edges. I wanted to ask if she was all right, but it felt too forward. Instead, I cut the tape with my pocket knife and tried to act normal. "What's in here?" She gave a little half-laugh. "Old parts. Things Dad never threw away. Figured your brother might use them." Her laugh wasn't the sharp, confident one from before. It faltered midway, softer, like she didn't have the energy to hold it up. She leaned on the edge of the bench, brushing her hair back with one hand. and for the first time, I noticed how heavy she looked. Not in her body, but in her posture, like someone carrying weight no one else could see. I tried to keep busy, pulling out rusted bolts and a bent bracket, pretending they were more interesting than they were. But I kept stealing glances at the way she kept adjusting her sleeve, the faint crease between her brows, the way her eyes wandered to the floor when she thought I wasn't looking. "You okay?" The words slipped out before I could stop them. She blinked, caught off guard. "I'm fine." But her tone had that practiced sharpness, too quick, too certain. She straightened, pulling her sleeves down further, as if tucking something away. I nodded like I believed her, though I didn't. Silence stretched between us, only broken by the faint rattle of tools in the back. I reached into the box, held up a cracked piece of tubing. "This is junk," I said, hoping to lighten the air. She gave me a smile, small, but it reached her eyes for a flicker. "Yeah, story of his garage. Junk and more junk." For a moment, we both just looked at the pile of parts like it was easier than looking at each other. Then she turned, brushing a strand of hair behind her ear, and her gaze met mine. Only for a second, but something was there, hesitation, almost like she wanted to say something and stopped herself. The second stretched longer than it should have. My throat tightened, and I couldn't look away. She broke it first, stepping back, reaching for her bag. "Tell your brother I dropped them off." Her voice was steady again. "Guard back up." But as she left, I caught one last detail. Her hand, lingering on the strap of her bag, fingers trembling just slightly. That image stayed with me longer than the box of useless parts. The storm came fast that night. One of those sudden downpours where the sky seemed to tear open and the gutters couldn't keep up. I was still in the shop, sweeping up the day's mess, when I heard the bell over the door jingle. It was her. Lena, hair damp from the rain, jacket pulled tight across her shoulders. She laughed when she saw me with the broom. "Didn't think you'd still be here. Didn't think you'd come in during a storm." I shot back, more defensive than I meant. She shrugged, shaking droplets from her sleeves. Car was acting strange. Figured I'd rather risk the rain than wait for it to break down completely. I wanted to tell her to sit, to dry off, to stay until it passed. But instead I just propped the broom against the wall and checked her keys. "I'll take a look." We ended up waiting together anyway. Her car wasn't in bad shape, just needed a quick check. The storm grew louder, sheets of rain pounding against the tin roof until conversation felt hushed, like the building itself was listening. She leaned against the counter, arms crossed, but her gaze kept drifting. Not to the storm, past me, to the tools, the clutter, sometimes to the floor, like she couldn't decide where it was safe to rest her eyes. "You don't have to stay late for this," she said after a while, softer now. "I can come back tomorrow." "It's fine." I wiped my hands on a rag, trying not to notice how close she was. A step, maybe two, separated us. The kind of closeness that doesn't look like anything to an outsider, but inside, it was too much. Her phone buzzed on the counter. She flinched, glanced at the screen, then flipped it face down without answering. I caught the name flashing just before it disappeared. A man's name. I didn't ask. Instead, I said, "Trouble?" Her silence stretched too long. Then, "Not your business." Her voice carried a sharp edge, but her hands betrayed her. Fingers gripping the counter, knuckles whitening. I wanted to step back, give her space. Instead, I found myself leaning in, elbows brushing the same countertop. The storm pressed harder, wind rattling the walls, making the small room feel even smaller. "You can tell me," I said, almost a whisper. Her head turned, slow, her eyes meeting mine. There was something raw in them, like the guard she usually wore had slipped for just a second. She opened her mouth, started to say something, then stopped. The moment stretched, her breath shallow, mine uneven. I thought, no, I knew. She was about to let something out. A secret, a confession, anything. But her phone buzzed again, louder this time. She grabbed it, pressed it to her chest, and stepped away like she'd touched a live wire. "I should go," she muttered. I nodded, though everything in me wanted to stop her. The storm was still raging, the road barely visible through sheets of rain, but she slipped out anyway. I stood there, staring at the door long after it closed, my pulse still racing from what almost happened. Almost. I found her again a few days later, not in the shop, but outside on the back steps. Evening light was fading, and she was sitting there with a coffee she hadn't touched, staring at nothing. My brother had already left. It was just us. For a moment, I thought about walking away, sparing us both whatever this was becoming. But my feet carried me forward anyway. "You're quiet tonight," I said, lowering myself onto the step beside her. The concrete was cool against my palms. She didn't answer right away, just glanced at me, then back at the dim sky. Sometimes it's easier not to talk. We sat in silence, listening to the buzz of a street lamp. I wanted to say something light, something safe. Instead, I kept watching the way her fingers circled the rim of the cup, restless. "You look tired," I murmured. She huffed softly, almost a laugh, but not quite. That's one way of putting it. Her guard was lower tonight. No quick comebacks, no smirk. Just lines around her eyes that looked deeper in the fading light. I wanted to ask what was weighing on her, but I knew if I did, it wouldn't be a small answer. Then she surprised me. "What are we doing?" The words were quiet, almost lost to the hum of the lamp. My chest tightened. I tried to buy time. "What do you mean?" Her head tilted toward me, her eyes steady now, though her voice trembled. "This, whatever it is between us. The looks, the pauses, the way you—" She stopped herself, shaking her head. "It's not nothing. But it shouldn't be anything either." I swallowed hard, throat dry. She'd spoken the thing I'd been circling in my head for weeks. The thing I didn't have the courage to name. "I don't know," I admitted. My voice sounded rough, smaller than I meant. "I just know I can't stop noticing you." The silence that followed was heavier than words. She turned away, her shoulders stiff. For a long while, we just sat there, the distance between us measured in inches that felt like miles. Finally, she whispered, almost to herself, "You make me feel seen. And that scares me." I didn't move, didn't breathe, afraid I'd break the moment. Her hand tightened on the cup, knuckles pale. Because once someone sees you, really sees you, they can leave. And then you're left with nothing but the fact that you needed them in the first place. She stood suddenly, coffee still untouched, eyes glassy in the half-light. Before I could answer, she turned toward the door. Her last words lingered like smoke. "I don't know if I can survive being needed again." Days passed where we didn't speak much. She stopped lingering in the shop, and I pretended not to notice when her car slowed outside before continuing on. We were orbiting the same world, but refusing to collide. Then one night, my phone buzzed, a voicemail from her. Not a call, just her voice in the static. "Hey, sorry for the other night. I shouldn't have said all that." A pause, then a shaky breath. "But there's something I need to tell you. Not here, not on this message. Tomorrow, if you're around." I replayed it 3 times, memorizing every break in her tone. The next day, she came by near closing. No small talk, no teasing. Just a quiet request. "Walk with me." We ended up at the park a few blocks away. The rain from earlier had left the ground damp, the air sharp and clean. She walked slow, hands buried deep in her coat pockets. I matched her pace, waiting. Finally, she stopped near a bench and sat. Her eyes stayed fixed on the playground, empty now except for a swing swaying in the breeze. "You remind me of someone," she said, almost too softly. I sat beside her, heart thudding. "Who?" Her jaw tightened before she answered. "My brother." The word hit harder than I expected. I stayed quiet. She kept going, voice low, careful. "He was younger than me, like you. Restless, always pushing at things. He died when I was your age. Accident. And ever since then." She trailed off, biting her lip, her eyes glossing in the dim light. "Ever since then, I've tried not to let anyone that close. Because if you lose them, it feels like your own fault for letting them matter." The confession sat heavy between us. I didn't know what to say, didn't trust my voice not to crack. She glanced at me finally, searching my face like she wasn't sure she should have told me at all. "You laugh like he did," she whispered. "And sometimes, when you look at me, I can't tell if I'm seeing you or remembering him." I gripped the edge of the bench, grounding myself. Part of me wanted to move closer, to take her hand. Another part knew I shouldn't. So I just asked, careful, "And what does that make this whatever this is between us?" Her lips parted, then closed again. She shook her head. That's what I don't know. And that's what terrifies me. The swing squeaked in the wind, carrying the silence. She turned away, hiding her face with her hand, and for the first time since I'd known her, I saw her cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just one tear tracing the lines of her cheek before she wiped it quickly, as if denying it happened. When she finally spoke again, it wasn't to me. It was to the air, to herself. I don't want to lose someone twice. I didn't expect to see her that night. The shop was already closed, the lights dim except for the desk lamp I'd left on while finishing some paperwork. Rain ticked against the windows again. Always rain, it seemed, when she appeared. The door opened softly. She stepped inside, no jacket this time, her blouse damp at the shoulders. She didn't explain why she was there, and I didn't ask. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Not staring, not searching, just waiting. Finally, she sighed, setting her bag down on the counter. I can't keep pretending this doesn't exist, she said. Her voice wasn't angry, wasn't shaky, just tired, almost relieved. I swallowed hard. Neither can I. The words hung there. No promises, no declarations. Just honesty, finally spoken. She came closer, step by step, until she was standing across from me at the desk. Her hands rested on the edge, fingers tapping once, then stilling. I noticed how her nails were short, uneven. How her eyes looked both exhausted and awake all at once. This isn't love, she said quietly. Not the way people think of it. It's messy, eh? More complicated. I nodded, throat tight. Maybe that's why it feels real. She blinked, her lips twitching into the faintest ghost of a smile. Then she shook her head, exhaling like she'd been holding her breath for years. Neither of us moved for a while. The silence was thick, but not suffocating this time. It was alive, like the air itself knew something had shifted. And then, without ceremony, she reached across the desk. Her hand brushed mine, not grasping, just resting there, warm against my skin, as if to say I'm here. I'm letting you in, even if it terrifies me. I didn't move at first, afraid to ruin it, afraid it might vanish. Then, slowly, I turned my palm up and let her fingers settle into mine. No words, no rush, just the weight of her hand in mine, grounding me, undoing me. She closed her eyes briefly, as though the contact was both a relief and a surrender. When she opened them again, there was no pretense, no wall. Just a woman who had fought too long against needing someone, finally letting herself stop fighting. I wanted to kiss her. God, I wanted to. But instead, I leaned forward, resting my forehead lightly against hers. The closeness was enough, more than enough. Her breath mingled with mine, steady, fragile, certain. We stayed like that, silent, connected, while the rain softened outside. No promises, no future laid out. Just this moment, raw and unshakable. When she finally whispered, it was barely audible. Don't make me regret this. My hand tightened around hers, the only vow I could offer. And in that quiet collapse, without drama, without fireworks, I knew something irreversible had begun. Looking back now, I don't think of it as a beginning or an ending. More like a moment we carved out of time. Something small but undeniable that neither of us could give back, even if we wanted to. We didn't become some perfect story. She didn't suddenly shed her fears, and I didn't stop being restless. But something shifted that night in the shop when she reached for my hand. It was the first time she let me see her without the armor, and the first time I understood that loving someone, if that's what you want to call it, doesn't have to be loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just showing up, again and again, even when it's hard. Lena taught me that. She showed me that love can live in silence, in the spaces between words, that it doesn't always announce itself with fireworks. Sometimes it's a hand resting on yours, trembling but steadying all the same. Sometimes it's a person admitting, I'm scared, and you staying anyway. I used to think I had to prove myself to her, that my youth, my persistence, my wanting her so badly would be enough. But over time, I realized what mattered wasn't me trying to be something more. It was just being there, letting her know she wasn't alone in her grief, in her fear of being seen and then abandoned. And she gave me something too, She gave me a glimpse of myself through her eyes, not as a kid fumbling his way forward, but as someone who could matter to another person. Someone who could stay, who could listen, who could carry a little weight without breaking under it. I don't know what anyone else would call what we had. It wasn't simple. It wasn't neat. But it was ours. And that's enough. Sometimes I still think about the first time we laughed together. How ordinary it seemed. How extraordinary it became. Or the night on the steps when she asked me, "What are we doing?" I didn't have an answer then. Maybe I still don't. But I've stopped needing one. Because maybe love isn't about naming it. Maybe it's about not running when it scares you. Not closing your eyes when someone finally looks at you like they see you. She sees me. And I see her. That's all that matters. So if you've been waiting for some grand declaration, or a kiss under the rain, or a happily ever after, you won't find it here. What we found was quieter, but no less real. And sometimes, quiet is the loudest thing in the world. Sparkles, if this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?